friends got a story to tell about a young man folks thought they knew so well. Rumors, lies, and all things between. Yeah, they were blind to what they didn't want to see. You can't be a prophet in your own town. Can't climb a ladder when folks keep putting you down. No, you can't be a prophet in your hometown. Takes a bucket load of courage, leave the world behind, in a basket full of effort and a strong-willed mind. Despite the aspersions, he took a leap of faith, and he made his own way to a brand new place. No, you can't be a prophet in your hometown. Can't climb a ladder when the rumors keep bringing you down. No, you can't be a prophet in your hometown.
Today's show is sponsored by Farmer Joe's Fresh Market, located at 1401 Southwest Pine Island Road in beautiful Cape Coral, Florida. Everything you need in more Lee County's greatest grocery store, Farmer Joe's. Now, Farmer Joe's has a Father's Day special coming up. And let me just tell you, they have a full rack of St. Louis ribs, 2 pounds of pulled brisket, sides, biscuits, Hawaiian rolls. And I'm telling you, all for $99 for Father's Day. You need to pre-order that. So call Farmer Joe's, the greatest grocery store in all of Lee County. Are you in the market for countertops? Give International Marble a call at 239-878-2200. Family owned and operated, serving Southwest Florida, making all your marble dreams come true. That's International Marble. Call them 239-878-2200. That's 239-878-2200. The multi-talented Mr. Ford O'Connell is with us. He is an author, a businessman, veteran political analyst, professor, and attorney. You can find Ford at FordO'Connell.com, Ford O'Connell on X, and often on Fox News, Newsmax, and most reputable news sources. Welcome to the Craft Culture Podcast. I'm Smokin Joe. Now, Ford, Donald Trump's one big, beautiful bill recently passed by the House. While the bill aims to extend tax cuts and the Jobs Act, can you break it down so we really know what's in this bill, Ford?
Absolutely. It basically does 4 things, Joe. The first, as you pointed out, is extend the 2017-2018 Trump tax cuts, but it also reduces federal spending, I think, by about $1.5 trillion over 10 years. It also reforms some welfare, including forcing those who take Medicaid to be able-bodied work requirements. It has nothing to do with seniors, despite what the Democrats say. But what it also really does is secure the border. And here's why that's important. In 2024, the top 2 issues were inflation and border security. And that's what this bill does. It aims to reduce inflation. In the first 4 months of the Trump presidency, inflation has actually cooled every single month. And therefore, that's why the Democrats are going crazy in the media.
So, I know that there's a little controversy, both from the Republicans and Democrats, over this bill. One thing that somebody brought up to my attention was in the bill, they claimed that it could, your dependency age of a child would be like 8 or 9 years old. Is that correct? I mean, are your child not going to be able to be a dependent under this bill? Is your child not going to be your dependent until they're 18 or through school? I mean, how does that work, Ford?
I'm not entirely clear on that. And the reason why I don't want to give you a firm answer is because this bill also has to pass the Senate. And when it goes up into the Senate, there will be some tweaks that will be made. And once the Senate passes it, and they only need to pass it with a majority of votes, the House and the Senate will then come together in conference, and then they'll mark up the bill and then push it back through the House and the Senate again. So we've got a little bit of ways to go on the specific details, but in terms of the overall details, the key here is that it's going to reduce inflation, and it's going to secure the border, and it's going to put work requirements on Medicaid in terms of able-bodied folks. And frankly, it's going to kick illegal aliens off of Medicaid, which at the end of the day is a good thing, because our entitlement system, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, is meant for United States citizens and naturalized aliens, not for the entire rest of the world.
Well, yeah, I agree. Now, Ford just throwing this in there. Elon Musk did come out and say, I don't know if a bill could be big and beautiful, and there was a little bit of backlash. Is there a rip in the sheets between Trump and Musk, or is that just talking points?
No, look, here's what I think. Elon Musk did something very rare. He talked about waste, fraud, and abuse, and then he acted upon it. We've never actually seen someone talk about it and then try to reduce it. Here's the problem with the big, beautiful bill. It goes through what is known as budget reconciliation, which means if you go through budget reconciliation, the only reductions you can make in spending are towards mandatory spending. What is mandatory spending? That's Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. Most of the cuts that he's identifying are actually in discretionary spending, and to get those cuts codified into law, you actually have to have 60 people in the United States Senate. The Trump administration is looking for other tools like the Impound Act to possibly be able to pass those. But overall, it's the difference between mandatory spending and discretionary spending. And I think Elon's heart's in the right place. But I think here's somebody who's, richest man on earth, smartest man on earth, whatever you want to say. You can put a rocket on the moon, but he walked right into the brick wall known as the swamp in government. The bureaucracy of government, I think, is what has Elon frustrated more than anything else.
Yeah, I guess it would be difficult when you have been the person that kind of had the power to control your world, and then you got to face with the bureaucrats in Washington. I guess that could be a little life-changing there. So,
well, that tells you how screwed up government is. The fact that you have to push all this way, even though he did a great thing, he identified something like $175 billion in spending reduction and waste, fraud, and abuse. And somehow it's such a common sense idea, but the Democrats will never go for it in the United States Senate because somehow Donald Trump did it. I tell you, if tomorrow Donald Trump said the world was round, Democrats in the legacy media would be arguing that it's flat for the next 3 years.
Well, to your point, I think a lot of them's already doing that.
Well, welcome to Trump derangement syndrome on steroids.
Well, Ford, some polls have the Democrat Party sitting at 21% approval. They have no clear leader. There's no new ideas. They're defending rapists, murderers, and basically promoting corruption. How do we deal with this? Are they, like you said, the derangement syndrome's there. Is there ever going to be a common ground, or is the Democrat Party even going to be able to recover from this?
Well, they will eventually recover from it because that's the nature of the two-party system, that the parties have to reinvent themselves over time. The good news is it doesn't appear that they're going to recover from this anytime this decade. And you pointed out the fact that it's about 21% the approval for the Democratic brand. That's the lowest in polling history, but it's even worse than that. You've got only 16% of Americans that say the Democrats have strong leaders, and you only have 19% of Americans that say Democrats can get things done. The issue for the Democrats is they've gone so Trump derangement syndrome that they're on the wrong side of every major issue. They're talking about basically stopping illegal alien criminals from being deported. Do you realize that 87% of Americans think that illegal aliens with criminal records should be deported, but somehow Democrats are digging their feet in the sand? It makes no sense. The other place we see how stupid they are is when it comes to actually advocating for men and women's sports. What is anyone thinking? These are what we call 80-20 issues. 80% of America agrees with Trump. 20% of America agrees with Democrats, and yet they keep dying on the same hill every single week.
Well, I can't help but wonder. I listen to what they say. Hakeem Jeffries, AOC. Did they ever go back and watch what they say? Because they just sound. Look, I mean, I've seen fifth graders that make more sense than these people do, and that is the head of the Democrat Party right now.
Well, that's exactly right. According to the polls, AOC most likely is technically the head of the Democratic Party, even though they don't have any leader. But that's what I've always said is all the Democrats are AOC because they believe in all the same nonsense. And I mean, I think that there's just no more stark way to see this than watching what's happening with them trying to block deportations of murderers, killers. We're not even in doubt that this is what they're like, oh, no, you can't do that. And then they'll argue about due process, and they don't seem to understand that when it comes to illegal aliens, that's controlled by the Immigration and Nationality Act, and is a very different process than it is for U.S. citizens. Remember, The due process of the Constitution is to protect you and me from government. Joe, it's not to protect illegal law trespassers from being deported.
Well, that's where I have the problem with it. Is people come to me and say, well, Joe, some of these people has been here 20 or 30 years. They haven't never committed a crime. They've lived here and worked, but they still came here illegally. If they came the right way the first time, I'd have no problems with this. But
amen. Look, that's USC 1325 and 1326, illegal entry into the United States, and then illegal re-entry into the United States, because some of these people have been deported and then come back again. And I mean, that's the entire thing. Just because you stayed here for 20 or 30 years does not give you the right to stay here. And that's the entire problem that I have with this. And look, I have sympathy for that argument, but at the same time, that is not a legal argument. Congress says on the books, if you are here illegally, you can be deported.
Yeah, I mean, I can't commit a crime, and just because I got away with it all these years, it makes it okay. And so no matter what anybody wants to say, it's a crime. They committed a crime when they stepped across the border, and if they come back more than once, that's multiple crimes. They should be on a list that says you can't never cross this border again.
Well, that's exactly right. And the other thing that they then try to say is, oh, the Trump administration's separating children. No, that's not how this works here. What's happened is that essentially, Joe, if you got a DUI tomorrow, you'd go to prison and you'd be separated from your children. That's how this works. And you know what? They say, well, that the children may be U.S. citizens, which we're still in debate over whether or not there's birthright citizenship for illegal lawbreakers in the first place. But I think Tom Homan said it right. We can deport whole families when you break the law.
Well, and again, I know several people that here in the area that are DACA babies and a couple other things, and they're hardworking people. I don't take that from them. They come out and they really do strive to do a good job to create income for them to send back to Mexico to help others get back over here. And I mean, I think if people really see the way it's like a shell game, they come over here, hustle money over here, ship it back over here, hustle money over there, and then eventually they get more people illegally over here.
Well, that's exactly right. You're talking about remittances, the sending of money back to their home foreign country. And of course, none of that is taxed. It does, and I'm against taxes, but the bottom line is none of that's taxed. The American economy doesn't actually benefit from their hard work. What happens is the foreign home country is the one that benefits, and then you get into a situation with birthright citizenship when you have two illegals that have a child in the United States, creating a chain migration crisis. I promise you, when the founding fathers sat down, and many of the different Congresses that worked on the Immigration Nationality Act, they never had it in their idea that if you come here and break the law, you should be rewarded by being able to stay here and also have a child have U.S. citizenship. This is a huge problem well beyond what we see with Hispanics. It is enormous with respect to Russians and the Chinese Communist Party, particularly out in California and Nevada.
Well, I've said this in the past. One thing that's bothered me is when they done the stimulus checks, I knew a lot of Mexican nationals who worked here because they had worked over here or whatever. They had a Social Security number. They all got them stimulus checks. Every one of them. They all got the COVID relief, whatever money that was supposed to go to the American citizens, that got paid to people. And many of them, they got that money as they were leaving on their way back to Mexico.
Well, that was the biggest crime of the Biden administration. Essentially, they allowed people to overstay their visas, which I hate to tell you is a crime. Again, and you should be deported. But after they overstayed their visas and should have been deported, the Biden administration gave them work authorization permits. And that was a huge, huge problem for the American citizen. Think about how much less we would have spent during COVID if somebody had said, hey, you know what? This money is only for United States citizens and naturalized aliens. But instead, once again, Joe Biden put the rest of the world first and America last.
Yeah, well, that just blew me away. I seen it happening. There was nobody to say nothing to because nobody was. It was just there was so many people got those stimulus checks. I don't even know if they've ever accounted for all of them.
No, they have not. And you've even seen a lot of scammers, particularly in the Soviet bloc, the old Soviet bloc in China, who were just stealing money straight out of the United States because it was like, hey, you know why people rob banks? Because that's where the money's at. So what did the foreign national hackers do? They started robbing from the U.S. government. Everyone's like, oh, we can't tell the truth because if we do, emotion might come out versus actually good governments and people actually feeling secure, because people don't seem to understand when you rack up a national debt like we have at 36, 37 trillion, the problem is the value of your money becomes worth less, which means that when you go to Publix, you go to, Joe's, the bottom line is your money does not go as far as it otherwise should be. Why? Because you're subsidizing the rest of the world.
I agree. Well, Ford, I want to talk about Joe Biden. You brought him up. Joe Biden has a lot of loyalists that continue denying his mental health issues. They recently come out and said he had advanced stage of prostate cancer. Before I proceed with this, we've had a few people that follow our show that comment, and they've made some pretty nasty comments about his cancer diagnosis. I don't wish nothing bad on nobody. I mean, I don't care for Joe Biden, but I don't wish that on nobody. And that being said, I hope that if this is true, I hope that they'll be able to get him the help to be comfortable. But if he had to have this during the time he was our president, Ford, and yourself, if you're taking medications for cancer treatment and things like that, it affects your cognitive ability.
Oh, I know. My father died of colorectal cancer. Look, nobody wishes cancer on Joe Biden or that he die from cancer. That's just a terrible thing because cancer is not anything anyone ever really wants to deal with. That said, remember, all this stuff that's coming out about Joe Biden, had he won re-election or had Kamala Harris won re-election, none of this would have ever come out. Right. That's the entire problem I have. And yes, he clearly had cancer for a lot longer than they said. Not only that, he clearly was probably in a mental decline before he even took the oath of office in 2021. They knew that essentially they had a diminished Biden, but they were going to run him anyway, and they were going to win with him anyway, and then they're going to throw him under the bus when he's no longer useful to them. I think what's even crazier is there's one whistleblower I heard out there that was talking about how he had such bad mental decline that he would get lost in the closets in the White House. Now, how is it that you don't invoke the 25th Amendment? That's the entire point of this. But again, a certain set of people wanted to hang on to power. I think what's even worse is when you look at some of these executive orders that Biden signed and some of these pardons, like including Hunter Biden's, which is the most ridiculous, expansive pardon I've ever seen in the history of the world. The question is, are they actually legal? Because clearly he didn't have the mental cognitive ability to do it. Hunter Biden probably wrote his own pardon when you think about it.
Well, there's been a lot of speculation that Hunter and Jill was the ones basically running operations with a few staffers.
Well, that's exactly right. And none of these people were Senate confirmed. So they really didn't even have the ability to do what they actually did. This is the biggest scandal in modern political history. And most of the legacy media just wants to turn the page. And then the Democrats act like, oh, this only just happened in the final few weeks of his presidency. Nonsense. It was going on for years. I think it was Charlemagne the God, one of the African-American podcasters was talking about this. He goes, because of COVID in 2020, we don't even know if he could walk back then. That's how bad it was. But yet they hid this. And it's not just, the physical side, the mental side. They were fully well telling you that if you said that he had mental decline or he was in some way in trouble, medically, they called you a conspiracy theorist. Where do we all go to get back our money, including that special counsel, Robert Hur, who looked into it and everyone said, oh, God, he's such a bad person. Robert Hur was being kind when he said he was basically an old old man who really just didn't have the ability to stand trial mentally.
Yeah, that to me, that somebody should have stood trial. Maybe not him, but the people that propped him up like a puppet for all those years. I mean,
well, that's the other thing. That's the gall I have with Jake Tapper in this book that he put out, this Original Sin. He's like, he tries to pass it off like he wrote this in the last 3 or 4 months. He obviously had this information for over a year and sat on it. Talk about a grifter's grift. This guy took part of the cover-up, and now he's trying to make money off of the cover-up. That is the most amazing thing. We'll say, I just didn't know. Nonsense. The White House probably called you with talking points every single day, and you decided to run with them. Why? Because you hated Donald Trump that much.
Yeah, when I seen that, the name of his book was Original Sin. He talking about his effectiveness to cover all this up for all these years until he could make money off of it.
Well, I thought the idea with news was to actually break news, not actually sit on the news until it actually benefited you economically. And then he's trying to revamp all of their credibility, all of them, whether it's ABC, NBC, CBS. I mean, really other than Fox News, Fox Business, and Newsmax, and obviously some what I would call conservative podcasters and blogs, like everyone who said this, and I was said this with Trey Radel as far back as almost 2020. And what's crazy is, as we find out from the Wall Street Journal, is about far back as 2019, they still try to pretend that we were all Looney Tunes. And I'll never forget the craziest was the MSNBC headline that said, Republicans float conspiracy theory that Joe Biden won't be at the top of the ballot. And sure enough, he's not at the top of the ballot. He's replaced. Remember, you can go back and look at what you would think at the time are 9 of the 10 craziest things Donald Trump ever said, and they all came true. That's the amazing part. Not like just a little bit, not like in the ballpark. He was spot on over the target.
Yeah, well, that Biden's press secretary, the little lesbian girl, Jean, whatever, she come out and said that she never got to speak to the president or any of his close staffers. Now, can you believe the press secretary who briefed us daily never even got to speak to the president?
Well, I think that's when you can say you took part in the conspiracy, because it's either commission, you were part of it, or omission, you just chose to stick your head in the sand like an ostrich. And that's basically what they all did. And then the worst part is a couple of them have said, well, we started to come clean. Yeah, we knew, but we do it again because we hate Donald Trump. And the whole reason why they're able to create this nonsense and not take more punishment from Democrats for this ruse that they actually did is because if you say that Donald Trump is an existential threat to democracy, which is a total lie, then you can rationalize anything. That's the whole problem with the Democrats. I mean, they literally at times just did not trust the American people to vote, so they propped up somebody who was like Weekend at Bernie's. Like, he just was not there at all. I mean, Christ, they dragged the man around.
Yeah, I'll tell you.
And they do it again. That's the worst part. They would do it again, and they would have no qualms about it.
And I don't think the American people realize this ain't even hardly lifted the dust off of what we'll probably uncover that went on during this presidency.
And somebody needs to be held accountable, because honestly, this can't go on in either party. And the reason why I say is, you just talk about the national security implications. The Chinese Communist Party, what was going on at the border? Was that actually Biden doing that? I mean, I know what he said during the primary, but he never showed himself to be this crazy of a radical when it came to illegal immigration. And I mean, remember, we had a Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, who kind of just went AWOL for a while. I mean, I'm honestly surprised that more foreign powers didn't take advantage of this. But then again, when you go to Europe and they say, oh, we want Joe Biden over Donald Trump, it's yes, because Joe Biden's the greatest, head of state ever for Europe, because he was giving America away to Europe.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk to you about the federal judges blocked Trump from instating global tariffs. And yet Oregon District Attorney Dan Rafel said Trump was attempting to find a loophole in the Constitution. Ford, let us know. I know this is the International Emergency Economic Powers Act is what Trump was trying to use, but break that down for us, Ford.
Yeah, what he's basically saying is that he's declared a national emergency over the fentanyl trade, the trade deficit, and the supply chains. And who can argue the supply chains aren't already in a national emergency situation? We all lived through COVID, and the idea that you're getting 80% of your medication from China is not a very good thing, especially when they're the ones spreading the Wuhan virus. So he's absolutely right in what he's doing. And what I found out as I looked at this 1977 law a little bit more, this is the vehicle they used, and so far there's been a pause, I believe, for another week that he can keep those tariffs in place. But, it's one of these things where this International Trade Court, they may understand trade, but they don't seem to understand constitutional law. And the deference when it comes to international law is that it's on the president's side if it's close. And therefore, Donald Trump is going to prevail on some, if not all of these tariffs. And if they have to go use another mechanism, they'll find another mechanism to do it. It's just unbelievable that these judges, these unelected bureaucrats, are basically trying to be the president and actually legislate as the president. Look, it was a joke that somebody said the other day. They said, Donald Trump, he probably shouldn't have run for president. He should have run for Supreme Court justice, because then you could actually be president.
Well, I heard one reporter making allegations that Donald Trump is known for seeking out antiquated bills and things like that and using them as case law. You know, I don't find that a bad thing. Somebody does their research and uses every tool in the toolbox.
Well, no, you're right, but you're using logic. Okay. The other thing that's going on here is to take like the Enemy Aliens Act. I'll never forget this. I was on TV and someone goes, "Well, that's just an old, antiquated law." I said, "You know what the oldest law is in the United States? It's called the United States Constitution, and we use it every day. So just because something is 200 years old doesn't make it antiquated." So this whole the Democrats have no way to push back because what Donald Trump's doing, particularly on inflation and securing the border and tariffs for the American worker, particularly with China, are things that the American public supports 70, 80% clip. What they're doing is they're finding a loophole in the Constitution that essentially allows them to slow down or stall the agenda of the president through the courts. I talk about this all the time. There's 677 federal district judges. And each one of them, apparently, according to the Constitution, has the same power as the president in terms of stopping laws. Now, that seems absolutely insane and not what the founding fathers tried, envisioned. But again, this is where we are. The Democrats are finding this loophole in the Constitution, and instead of interpreting law, they're making laws and violating the Separation of Powers Act that says the president has full authority to do this when Congress passes the laws.
Well, I think that people will soon realize that what Donald Trump's done with the tariffs is a good thing for America. It's going to make things, believe it or not, I believe it's going to make cars more affordable. It's going to make a lot of things more affordable because we're not having to pay this exuberant tariff on anything we get from there, with them not having to pay none on anything they get from us. And it's been unfair, and Donald Trump's been one of the first presidents to point it out and try to implement something to change it.
Well, that's exactly right. We couldn't keep doing the same status quo over and over because we were going to be in trouble and America was going to be bankrupt. Remember, I said that inflation has been down, cooling, in the 4 months that Donald Trump's been president. You know what else has happened? Income has gone up 0.8%, which I think is the highest in quite some time under Donald Trump. He's obviously narrowing the trade deficit with the tariffs. And I think people need to understand there is going to be some short-term pain. But at the same time, this is about the American worker. This is about bringing our supply chains home for national security reasons. And this is about putting America first. America first does not mean America alone, but it does mean that America and her workers come first.
Yeah, absolutely, as it should be. And I think any country, if you lived in any other country, you should have pride in your country and take stock in the things, the resources you have, and you should be proud. It should be your country first, and we're Americans.
Well, and that's the biggest problem going on in academia, and you're seeing it within the Democratic Party is, you get all these young people because they've been so indoctrinated. They're like, I'm ashamed to be an American. I believe in Palestine more than America. I'm like, wait a minute, people. You live in a country where you can get on your smartphone and get a milkshake, okay, from an Uber driver. You wouldn't last 10 minutes in Palestine or in Iran or some of these other countries that you try to say are right compared to the United States of America, which is the greatest democratic experiment in the history of the world.
Absolutely. Well, Ford, I want to talk to you. There's a lot of people up in arms. Dan Bongino and Kash Patel, who have kept a pretty light social media imprint since they've been put into office here. But they did come out in an interview and made the statement that Epstein killed himself and that Crooks was the lone shooter in Pennsylvania. Now, I've heard a lot of people say, what happened? Did they sell out? I respect Dan Bongino and Kash Patel. I don't think they've sold out. What do you think that's happened here for? What do you think?
I don't think they sold out at all. I've known Dan Bongino for quite a long time, and he is a first-class person of integrity. I don't know Kash Patel as well, but from what I hear, he's a high integrity person as well. I mean, I don't know if they've been given all the information. I mean, who knows what's going on in the deep state these days? I mean, when you're blocking the attorney general from getting information she could request and then you're slow-walling it, I don't know what to tell you. But I don't think that Dan Bongino and Kash Patel are lying. The only question is if they've seen all the information.
Well, Bongino made a comment. I've seen the information. He said, and he made a comment that he'd reviewed it. But as I told you off the air, I've thought about this. I respect both these men. I don't see them as people that would sell out after they're getting in a position. And Bongino was the one that said, "Don't let this die. Keep it." When he was talking about Epstein and Crooks, he expressed that he wanted people to keep this story alive. I think, this is me, Donald Trump is a very intelligent man. And, when it comes to playing chess, as you may, politically, I think that he has probably said, "Look, boys, this is what they say out there. Leave it at this for now. We're going to need, they're going to come after me harder, and we're going to need to find something in the wood pile. And it would be real easy to find that extra shooter on the water tower or whatever with Crooks, or to find out that maybe Epstein did kill himself, but maybe he didn't have no other choice. Somebody could come in and say, hey, this is your ticket."
Well, yeah, I mean, look, there's no question about it. Those are all possibilities. Again, I don't know. I can only go by what Bongino and Cash Patel say, but that's not the craziest thing in politics. Sometimes information is held for personal reasons because they know that they need extra firepower and ammo. I think, when it comes to Epstein, the Democrats have a lot more to be worried about the Epstein situation than the Republicans do, even though there are both parties involved. But, when I look at the list of the most known names, it's like 80-20 Democrat. Okay. And when it comes to Crooks, I mean, the only issue I have there is that, you always hear the mainstream media talk about both sides with radicalism and this, that, and the other. Well, for the last 5.5 years, I've only seen one party purposely pushing violence over and over. And then you have 2 assassination attempts, including one with a hit to the ear. So, I mean, this is a situation. What does Ilhan Omar and AOC think is going to happen when they go out there and say, you got to get up in their face and push back on a bully or whatever nonsense they're parroting today? How do they not think that this leads to violence? I don't hear one Republican saying, you got to really get up in the Democrat's face and slug them. I mean, if you said that, you'd be in jail if you were a Republican.
And in certain things that you might have said that you totally had a different meaning by, if Democrats say it, they can get by with it. If a Republican or a conservative says it, they're, for example, you can say, oh, well, Donald Trump's going to kill it. Okay, that means he's going to do something good, but they'll take it as Donald Trump. Oh, they said Donald Trump's going to kill somebody, or he's going, there's such an indifference in the way conservatives can speak and the way Democrats can speak.
That's true, but you also have the legacy media, which is an appendage of the Democratic Party, taking these clips on the nightly news or whatever, basically trying to gaslight the Democratic base. I mean, if you really talk to the Democratic base today, particularly on federal elections right now, you'd think that they're on a different planet. Like, they're not even listening. And the reason is because the sources of news that they go to have gaslighted them for about 5 years about Donald Trump. And yet they don't seem to understand, but yet trust in the media is at an all-time low. And somehow Democrats trust the media, the legacy media, more than anybody else. Maybe somebody should stop getting high on their own stash.
Yeah, I agree. And, that's the thing. Like I said, I don't promote violence. I think that your rights end where somebody else's skin begins. I've tried to teach my kids that their whole life. People can say whatever they want, but, when it gets to the point where you're provoking somebody into a physical altercation, you're the problem.
Well, that's exactly right. I'm a big First Amendment supporter. I mean, I'm like underneath Elon. No one, I think, is bigger than Elon when it comes to First Amendment support. But I will also say, there's the violence too, but it also seems that they're yelling fire in a crowded theater every day. And unfortunately, that does not give you a First Amendment protection. But unfortunately, when you cry wolf every single day, eventually the wolf's going to come and no one's going to actually be awake for it. And that's, I think, the real problem here. And they've been using this over and over. I mean, you look at the 2024 election, just about every single demographic moved right except for one. And I talk about this all the time, and that's college-educated white women. Right. And, that's because that's a situation where that's a certain demographic where you can use emotion and gaslighting to make them vote the way you want them to vote. And it's truly, truly unfortunate. And I think this is a problem overall with colleges, is that everyone believes that their emotions somehow must be a truth, especially if they're gaslighted long enough. It's a scary, scary proposition.
Well, folks, it's about that time for us to go over to the local side of things.
The man's trash.
The part was how they were saying, Lily, a hurricane could take your home away, but the man's trash. I mean, that is unbelievable.
The man's trash.
Man's trash.
All right, so on the man's trash today, Ford, Cape Coral Mayor John Gunther is still the most hated mayor ever to be elected in the area. And, you know, I just don't understand how he got reelected. I mean, we've spoke about Gunther several times. We are the source that broke the information about Gunther's pretty questionable past with violence and other things. We broke that story. But yet there was another election after that, and the people still voted this person back into office. I had a little trouble with that, and I've had several people ask me why I don't come back to Cape Coral and speak. I might come back, but it was so dissatisfying that the community was up in arms with everything that this mayor and the former council done, and yet you still voted him right back in. You voted a couple of them back in. I can't say it. But that being said, there is a new nonprofit, and it is named Take Out the Trash Committee of Cape Coral Incorporated. And this is headed by a young man named Kyle Lahamadou. And he is actively seeking signatures for the recall of Mayor John Gunther. Now, Ford, I do agree that, you know, that Mayor John Gunther needs to be recalled. He's not the only one on that board that I think needs to go. However, it's so many signatures in such a short amount of time that you have to acquire to get this process going forward. And I just don't know if especially in the slow season of our area, I just don't know that you'll get it.
Yeah, that's very hard. I mean, that's the whole point of recalls. You know, Florida makes it so that, you know, it's not an easy thing to overturn the will of the voters. And it's very, very hard, as you know, because in Lee County, basically half the people are gone, you know, in the summer. And it's very, very hard to figure that out. And, you know, the only good thing is it's hot as hell to go door to door. I can tell you, as someone who's done it in the heat of the summer, it's not an easy thing to do. And unfortunately, unless you're going to get a lot of people to help this individual do this, it's going to be very, very hard to gather those signatures.
Well, he does have some help, and there is a couple of locations, because it does have to be signed in front of someone that can certify that they seen the signature. And I've seen that he was at I don't know all the locations, and we'll put them up on our Facebook or whatever for people. But I give him the credit that he really is working hard at trying to get this moving. And realistically, we shouldn't even have had to worry about it at this point. It should have been over with, you know. But anyway.
Well, I always got to tip my hat to people, whether I agree with them or don't, who decide to step in the political ring or put their money where their mouth is when it comes to certain types of activism. You know, whether I agree with someone or I don't, I always tip my hat to them, because a lot of people really don't know what a groveling experience it can be at times in the political arena.
Well, you know, we disclosed Gunther's past with, you know, he had, you know, he destroyed a woman's house, tried to run her husband over with a vehicle. We exposed that, had all the records. We had all the police reports and stuff. You know, the thing is, he's done so much more since he's come to Cape Coral. You know, the community, they're upset with JC Park. They're upset with Yellow Fever Creek. They're upset with the Yacht Club. They're upset with the boathouse. They're upset with the JC Park, with 3 or 4 other parks. And then, you know, he turned around and he had a seawall built on a property which was against the rules, Cape Coral's rules. You had to have a structure on the property before you could build the seawall. Well, his response to that was he changed the law so that it was legal. And he said, before I'd done that, I just checked to see. This is basically what he said. I checked to see how many other people broke the law like I did before I decided to change the law. He had already broke the law. He found about 200 other residents had done the same thing. So it made it okay. So because I want to do it, we change. Any other time, them people will be getting cited. You code enforcement in Cape Coral runs day and night, Ford.
Well, that also seems a little bit like self-enrichment and on the cusp of corruption when changing a law essentially for your own benefit, even though he's trying to claim, well, there was 200 other people. I mean, that's just Mickey Mouse crap.
Well, again, like I said, Cape Coral's got full with that council and with that mayor. I do hope that they get traction. My hat's off to Mr. Lahamadou for stepping up and basically following what we started a couple years ago. And I hope that he's successful. I mean, I just really hope that the people has finally had enough and they'll step up and say, we're not going to sit here and put up with this no more. Why do we elect these people to take our money? And I tell you something else he done just recently in the news. If you had an Airbnb over in Cape Coral, it cost you a $35 one-time fee. He is trying to up that to $600 annually on anybody that's got an Airbnb. I mean, there's a lot of, if you got an Airbnb rental property, you're only going to rent them out usually for a week at a time. Not every week they're going to rent, but you're going to pay all that additional money. And a lot of people, they're barely making the mortgage to do these Airbnbs. They're just, they're just trying to make the mortgage and the taxes. And if you throw another $600 annually on them, whether they rent it out or not, they got to pay it.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me that you're trying to stifle small business. It also seems to me that you're probably doing it at the behest of someone else's interest, because $600 seems a very round number, by the way, for a new Airbnb fee. And I think that's exactly right. I think clearly some backers of Gunther or whomever essentially said, hey, you know what? I need you to price some of these people out of the market. That's unfortunate, particularly given, the housing crisis that we have in Southwest Florida.
Oh, they're definitely pricing the younger generation out of Cape Coral. I mean, if you haven't already made your living, you're not gonna maintain in Cape Coral. They've got too many fees. We've got Ford. I mean, there's so many. We're going to talk more on Cape Coral as we go forward because there's so much going on with Cape Coral. And I just tell you, folks, take time to look into some of the things that this council and this mayor's done. And you'll sit back if you really look into it, and you'll just say, how did we let them get this far? How do we let them get away with it? I don't understand it, Ford. It's me. But I want to also tell you, the citizens of Fort Myers Beach are also calling for the removal of two council members, claiming that they broke Florida Sunshine Law. Former Mayor Ray Murphy, claims council members King and Woodson met with developers behind closed doors. Petitions have been created to recall these council members as well, Ford. So recall is the word of the month, I guess.
Yes, it is. And let's remind the viewers what the Florida Sunshine Law basically says. And that's chapter, I believe, 288. And what it does is it mandates that meetings of public boards or commissioners must be open to the public with reasonable notice provided and minutes recorded. So that means got to be open to the public. You can't just hold it, bring notice 1 minute and then have the meeting so that no one can be there. But you're also supposed to have minutes. And the only exemptions that are out there generally revolve around attorney-client sessions, things like that with lawyers where that goes around the Sunshine Law, which is meant to be because you're supposed to have, privacy on that thing. But, people need to understand that penalties can be fines or removal from office or invalidation of actual actions. This is a very, very important law that I don't think a lot of people necessarily understand. And I do think that a lot of people that are in public office in Southwest Florida probably violate these laws quite regularly.
Oh, I agree. And I felt like we caught the school district violating the laws. And, a lot of this stuff with Fort Myers Beach, it ties in with the school district. Fort Myers Beach School, where we had one developer saying that he was going to buy it for $1 and, previously. And, now somebody's probably going to get that property for $1 for it. I mean, they hired a company to come in, and I have to look, I was a beach resident for a lot of years. I had a kid that went to beach school. My wife went to beach school. I know the school, but after looking at what this company found, it's just not sustainable for it. It costs too much money. And However, Denise Carlin is going back on her word. This is yet another lie from the superintendent. She promised them people she's going to rebuild that school. But instead, she hired a consultant company to tell her why she should.
You know, people say they're always going to do one thing to get into office in Southwest Florida, and then they basically back down on about, 80, 90% of their pledges. It's getting really, really bad. And I'm starting to wonder, and I've said this before, and I just mean the majority, not all, not naming names, but it seems like a lot of people are not acting in the best interest of Southwest Florida. They're just trying to get themselves into another office from the one they currently sit in.
Well, we got a lot more to report on with the school district, Cape Coral, and Fort Myers Beach. We're going to wrap it up today, and we'll get back with you. We plan on getting back in the swing of these things now some of these holidays out of the way. Ford, you got anything coming up?
Not at the moment, but I will be out on the TV trail pushing hard for Donald Trump and making sure we get this big, beautiful bill passed hopefully soon, because people don't realize that if you don't extend those tax cuts, that Americans are going to have about a 60% tax increase. And if you think people are pissed off now, get ready.
I hear you. Thank you, folks, for joining us with the Crack Culture Podcast here on Smokin Joe Nation YouTube. I'd like to thank Mr. Ford O'Connell for joining me. His insight is always enough to keep us going for another week. We'll be back soon. I'm Smokin Joe with Ford O'Connell. We love you, Florida. Love, peace, and Gator Grease.